Hi, I'm Todd Jones, host of the podcast Pressbox Access. Here's a clip from my interview with Al Pearce. Al tells us about the side of tough guy Dale Earnhardt that the legendary stock car driver rarely let the public see. When you think of Daytona, I know a lot of people, especially younger folks, they think of Dale Earnhardt.
Yeah.
And you mentioned his death, and I want to ask you about that day. But I also just want to talk to you a little bit about Dale, the person you got to know, the racer. When you think about Earnhardt, what do you think about?
He would not want you to know how soft he was as a human being. He would want you to know he was a badass racer who came from 18th to win at Talladega, who flipped and rolled at Daytona, got out of his car, noticed that the four tires were still up, got back in it, had them push it to the garage where it could be repaired. He would not want you to know that if you were a member of the media or you were a crewman for another team and something happened back at home and you had to go back to Charlotte or wherever you lived, you could have his airplane. He would not tell you anybody that I sent two guys home yesterday. Their wives went into labor. They couldn't get there in driving time. I gave them my plane. He'd never tell you that. He would tell you, I wouldn't wreck my mother to win, but I'd wreck your mother. and he was that way. He was so focused on winning.
The Intimidator.
Intimidator, he would not want you to know that there was a side of him that was altogether different from that.
Did you ever have a personal experience with that side of Dale Earnhardt?
I think at some point all of us interviewed him individually, but it was probably all a racing question.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think of the new tires? Well, they don't work crap. I never talked to him on a personal level. It was always professional. Richard and I had a personal relationship.
Right.
Dale and I were mostly, and Dale was like this with most every media person. He would keep you over there, but he would be polite and accommodating as long as it didn't interfere with being in the race car.
Mm-hmm.
I think the thing about that day at Daytona that most of us still remember was it did not look that bad.
Yeah, the day you're mentioning is February 18th, 2001.
We had seen Dale, we had seen a myriad of drivers crash way, way, way looking worse than his. The year that Richard Petty went down the front stretch, rolling and tumbling, got out and waved at the crowd. And that was, I called back and told my wife while he was still tumbling, I think I might have said, if he's dead, I'm done. I'm not going to cover this crap anymore. But he was fine. So when Dale hit the wall and came back down and Schrader got into him, I don't think any of us in the media center or the press box thought anything of it other than, boy, he's going to be pissed. He's going to really be mad because he was running third and now he's going to finish 20th or something like that.
Yeah, it's turn 4. It's the final lap of the Daytona 500.
Coming for the flag. Coming for the flag.
And it didn't look bad, but he was going 160, and all of a sudden he goes from 160 to 0 in 80 milliseconds.
Yeah, his head went forward, and that was before Honda's devices. The tragedy, many tragedies surround that, and I'm not getting teary about that. My eye just waters a lot. But anyway, there were many tragedies about that, or many ironies about that thing. One of which was Brett Bodine had tested the Hans device several times. Brett Bodine had raced many times the previous year with the Hans device. And after a particularly bad wreck with it, which did not affect him at all, he never got in a race car again without it. the morning of the race, or maybe the Saturday. I'm not sure which it was. And if I'm talking too long, just stop me. The morning of the race, Brett Bodine went up to Earnhardt and showed him his Honda device. He said, you know, you really should try one of these things. You know, that wreck I had at Michigan last fall didn't affect me at all. You should really try it. And Earnhardt responded, as a badass driver would, by saying, he used the term I'm not going to use to indicate that Bodine was a little less manly than the rest of us because he's wearing this safety device that hooks to your helmet, your shoulder, and keeps your head from. And Bodine later on said if he'd been wearing a Honda device, from everything we have seen of that wreck, he would have survived. No problem at all. Maybe a problem a little bit, but not dead. So anyway, that's one thing. Earnhardt was given the opportunity to use the Hans and turned it down. The other thing people want to say is that Earnhardt was killed blocking for his two team drivers up front. And that's not exactly right. At that point on the racetrack, coming through turn 4, headed for the little short chute, those two, Michael Waltrip and Jr., were gone. They were going to finish 1-2. There's no question about that. People say, well, Earnhardt was trying to block Sterling Marlin to keep Sterling from beating his drivers. Oh, that's not true. There's no way in the world Sterling Marlin could have come from 4th past Big Dale Jr. and Michael Waltrip in that distance. So Earnhardt was racing for 3rd. He wasn't racing to help his teammates. Now, he had been racing to help his teammates on the backstretch earlier.
Right.
But once they got through turn 3 and 4, and once Michael and Jr. settled down, come into the flag, Earnhardt was racing for 3rd, and he knew it. So people who say he got killed protecting his son, that's bull. That's just not right.
That's like mythologizing it. Yeah, it helps people deal with the grief that they felt, right, as a fan.
He was racing for 3rd.
So when he hits the wall, like you said, you didn't think much of it.
No.
What was it like in the press box as it unfolded from there?
The thing I remember most is the car hit the wall, Ken Schrader hit him, and they came down the banking into the infield. Earnhardt, obviously, did not lower his window net, which is the international sign that I'm okay. If you're in a bad wreck in NASCAR, even if your car won't move or is torn all to pieces, if you let down your window net, the safety crew knows that at least you can do that. So for a long time, there was no window net coming down. And then when Ken Schrader got to Earnhardt's window and lowered it down, Schrader just kind of instinctively turned away and began to frantically, not just, hey guys, frantically wave for the rescue people to get over there. And the other thing that we got our attention was Darrell Waltrip was on TV on Fox. I think that was the first Fox broadcast.
Mm-hmm.
Darrell Waltrip was on there looking down turn toward 4. The camera was on Darrell, and Darrell was saying, "Boy, I hope Dale's all right. That's a bad crash, people. That's a hard hit. I'm worried about my buddy. I really hope he's okay." That got our attention.
Mm.
And then when they put him in the ambulance and took him directly to the hospital without bothering to go to the medical center, we figured this is really bad. And they covered the car, brought it to the inspection impound area, and it was a long time before we heard anything from the hospital. And we saw pictures of Junior rushing in with Teresa, and I think his sister was with him. I think we all began to realize right then this could be really, really bad. We don't know how bad. It could be fatal, it could be life-changing, it could be whatever. And it wasn't until Mike Helton came in the media center and sat up on that chair and said, I've got a terrible announcement to make. And obviously by then we knew. The only question that remains, and it's not a big deal, was whether he was dead at the racetrack or died on the way to the hospital. And the important thing there is, not really important now, but if he was killed at the racetrack, it would be handled by the state of Florida as a workplace fatality.
Oh, that's interesting. I never thought of that.
If he died at the hospital, it was just another person being brought in who died. Not that it makes a bit of difference. But that's, we may never know that answer. I drove home that night, Virginia, 715 miles overnight, listened to every talk show I could listen to, and most of them, believe it or not, talked about him. You think people in Seattle and Chicago and Dallas would say, well, they killed another driver at Daytona today, and that's the way it goes. But these people were compassionate and understanding, and they realized it was a big deal.
He transcended NASCAR, right?
Yeah.
Why is that? I mean, he won 76 times. He won 7 championships like Petty and later Jimmy Johnson. But what was it about Earnhardt that made other people who maybe weren't racing fans pay attention?
He was every man. He had come up. His father had been a racer who died working on his race car. Dale came up the hard way, driving junk cars until he got decent. He never, like Richard Petty, he never put on pretensions. He never acted like he was bigger than he was. He had a soft spot that occasionally came through that you might not have wanted to see, but he did it. He was basically an outdoorsman. He'd get on a tractor and till a field. He'd get on a caterpillar and dig a road if he wanted to. He was every man. He was a regular guy. I don't know that he ever went to the White House. I don't know that he was ever honored by any president or any organizations like the UN. But he just can't. He had a personality that people enjoyed being around because he'd play with you. He'd mess around with you. And Junior, his son, is very much the same way. Junior is an absolutely wonderful human being, compassionate, caring, will do anything for you if he can, does that little podcast of his and talks to people and asks hard questions, but doesn't go beyond whatever line has been drawn. Mm-hmm. That whole family's, their mama raised them right, as they're said. Their mom and their daddy raised them boys right.